Jordan, what did you learn from Shaq?
So Shaq, this is going to be an interesting quiz because I've had like 1,500 interviews. So it's like, this game should be called Do You Remember? But yeah, what I learned from Shaq, actually, he's a really interesting guy. You wouldn't, I got to say this diplomatically, you wouldn't necessarily expect that. If you don't care about basketball, you might think, what am I going to learn from this guy? But I asked him, hey, man, you've got a career that has had longevity outside the NBA. How do you make decisions? And one of the things that he told me that stuck with me for a really long time was he has a panel of people that he trusts that help him make decisions. Now, that's not necessarily terribly original for a business, but for a person, it's actually a really good idea because he'll have his old, I want to say his old basketball coach from high school who just isn't going to make any money from him, just cares about him as a person, probably mentored him when he was young. And that guy will say, I think you should do this because of this, or I don't think you should do this because of that, or I have no opinion on this. But then he's got his lawyer, he's got his accountant, but you don't want to just ask your lawyer whether you should do something because the answer is always no, right? Because it could incur you can incur liability. You don't want to ask your financial planner, your manager, your accountant, whatever, if you should do something because the answer is always yes, because they're like, well, we're going to make money doing it. And then he has, I want to say his mom is on the panel, his uncle's on the panel. So there's people on there that will say, yes, this is lucrative. Yes, you might be able to do it without incurring liability, but you're going to hate it. It's stupid. It's not your style. You're going to be bored. You're going to think it's dumb. Other people are going to think you're dumb for doing it, whatever it is. And so he can take all of those inputs and weigh them and decide whether he's going to do something. And you still see him doing some things where you think, what are you doing, man? But the answer is probably making a ton of money, right? That, like when you see him doing those insurance ads and you think that can't be that fun and it's not that great for your brand. The answer is probably, yeah, but they paid me 50 million bucks. Who knows? So I just thought that was a really interesting way to make decisions because if I'm looking, and I look at this in my own life, let's say I get a sponsor for the Jordan Harbinger Show, and it's something that I don't necessarily love as a product, but they're offering me a lot of money. I'll bounce it off my wife. I'll bounce it off my producer. I'll bounce it off the person who sold the campaign. I'll bounce it off people at my network, Podcast One, and they'll each have different inputs. They might say, this is a pretty lucrative campaign. You should do it. Somebody else might say, you're going to feel like an idiot for doing it. So I'm able to weigh those inputs, and I thought, this is a really good idea to have. Shaq calls it the panel, and I do the same. You bounce it off the panel and it stops you from making decisions based on one factor or based on one argument. And you really do get to weigh a diverse bucket of inputs in your life. And I don't think you should just do that for business. I think you should do that for your personal life too. Do I want to work more and make more money? Well, that sounds great. Well, maybe I should ask my wife. No, I want to go to on family trips. I want to be able to go to dinner at night. I want you to be done by 5:30 p.m. so you can play with the kids. You know, that's an important factor that I might not weigh when I'm going, oh, I could probably make a couple $100,000 extra dollars every year if I just had no free time. You know, those decisions have to be made in concert with those who matter the most in your life. And whether that's your spouse and your kids or other people that you trust. And the other function of that is people can't get away with anything, right? So if you have a manager and they're crooked or corrupt or they're pocketing your cash, well, if they're in meetings with your lawyer and your accountant all the time, it's going to be really hard for them to get away with that, right? Where's the money from this insurance campaign? Oh, I don't know. You know, everyone's in your business for better or for worse, but that means that it's harder to get away with stuff. It's harder to get away with convincing me I got to do something when everybody else thinks it's a bad idea because you're doing it in a forum where other people are involved. So it's hard for one person to have your ear and steer you the wrong way, even if that person is yourself.